Live from deep in an underground bunker in East Tennessee, this is America's premier mortgage fuel services expert, Paul Williams.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'd like to welcome you back to another edition of Foreclosurepedia Podcast. Foreclosurepedia Podcast is a presentation of the Foreclosurepedia Radio Network, which premieres each weekend. It's the 30th of September, 2017. The time is 22:30 hours Eastern Daylight Time. So, as you heard in the build-up to this portion of the podcast that we're putting out there, what's on everybody's mind as we've been discussing? A couple of big things have happened. First, I was named the press secretary for the International Association of Field Service Technicians. Now, as you all know, the IFST has been making some serious headway with a lot of very powerful players out there in the industry. We have Guardian Asset Management. They just brought in over $200 million in HUD contracts. We have Sentinel Field Services. They control in multiple states as a prime vendor the Fannie Mae contract. We have ZVN at a Canal Fulton. Brian Lizakowski, very powerful gentleman. In fact, Mr. Lizakowski was a gentleman not several years back whom had actually acknowledged the need for an additional trade association within the mortgage field services industry. So I'm very proud and honored to have received that title. We're going to bring the professionalism that I have always demonstrated while sitting behind the Foreclosurepedia mic to the International Association of Field Service Technicians. And as opposed to other forums which are present out there, we're going to engage members and non-members. So folks, be looking for that. Be looking for that over the next week or two. We're going to sit down. We're going to speak with Joel Irish, currently the chairman of the IFST. We're going to talk about the education platforms. Now, building upon the Barrowman decision, wherein federal jury verdicts in federal court in California, in just the past 10 jury verdicts, we have $2.2 million, which has been levied against Assurant Field Asset Services. We're looking at well over 150 more verdicts. And when we talk about the Vincent case, that's Vincent versus AMS, which is now MCS, those damages are going to go probably above the $50 million level. In Assurant Field Asset Services, we're looking in the tens of millions of dollars. And so that brings me to education is a very serious deal. And you have to have third parties whom are moving this education to those whom need it, because otherwise you are going to immediately be targeted for misclassifying employees as independent contractors. We'll talk more about that in our third hour. What I want to talk about right now, and rarely do I wade out into matters that really don't consider or really don't deal with the mortgage field services industry, but I'll tell you something that's really got me pissed off. That's the National Football League. Now, for years, professional sports have always been a venue where the American public and even internationally, people could go and watch these sports and not have to be brought into the insanity of what is going on and emanating from the Beltway. If I sit down to watch an NFL game, I want to sit down with my son, and I want to talk about pass plays. I want to talk about coaches. I want to talk about here in Tennessee, here in East Tennessee, what the Tennessee Volunteers mean to me. Granted, not the best record, and it hasn't been for a couple of years, but nonetheless, I want to talk about football. I don't want to talk about whom is elected to what position. I don't want to talk about racial disparity because of the fact that it has no bearing on the game that I'm watching. You know, the hypocrisy surrounding NFL players taking a knee is best exemplified by the billions of dollars that the NFL takes from Uncle Sam while shitting on the flag. Look, Emperor Nero would blush when it comes to the amounts of subsidies for Romanesque coliseums given to the NFL by U.S. taxpayers. You know, there has been a ton and ton of research that's been put out on this. I mean, according to analysis from ESPN, the total price tag to taxpayers for building new stadiums and renovating old ones has been $6.7 billion. That's billion with a B dollars since 1997. That includes 19 new stadiums and major renovation projects. Look, ladies and gentlemen, the United States, the flag, patriotism, this is a brand. And when we talk about brand, and that is precisely what the NFL has received in payments to further, the NFL has the duty and the obligation of protecting both the U.S. taxpayer and America. First and foremost, the bullshit about NFL players having a First Amendment right is just that, bullshit. There's a legal term, and it deals with under color of state law. We see this a lot in civil rights disputes. So an individual acts either in official capacity or in a personal capacity. If Colin Kaepernick and the rest of those joining he in his spurious at best protest want to demonstrate on their own time, that's freedom of speech. Kaepernick et al. Are on their team's owner's time when they're demonstrating the way that they are now. These highly overpaid athletes are employees. The owners of the NFL teams employ them. And what they say and do while on the clock is the right of their NFL team's owners to sanction and to limit. And when it comes to non-disparagement, and that's a great legal term that anybody out there listening to me tonight is familiar with because it's in every one of your contracts, the reality is that whether NFL Commissioner Roger Goodell likes it or not, he is risking an enormity of municipal, county, state, and federal backlash. To truly understand where this half-baked idea of Team Kaepernick is going, listen to how The Intercept broke down the NFL actions thus far. Quote, and the team executives have been public about their feelings, though only while hiding behind a cloak of anonymity. Mike Freeman, one of sports site Bleacher Report, has been reporting on the intense hatred among NFL team front office employees. One general manager told Freeman of Kaepernick that he estimated a clear majority of NFL front offices, quote, genuinely hate him and cannot stand what he did, end quote, kneeling for the national anthem. They want nothing to do with him. They won't move on. The same general manager went on to say that many of the other team's executives were afraid to put Kaepernick on the roster because, quote, Trump will tweet about the team. And that general manager was not alone. Another front office executive called Kaepernick, quote, a traitor. Yet another said He has no respect for our country. Fuck that guy. Another executive said he would think about resigning his position if a team owner asked him to sign Kaepernick. One general manager summed up the feelings among NFL team executives, quote, "In my career, I have never seen a guy so hated by front office guys as Kaepernick," end quote. All 7 team executives interviewed by Freeman for One Piece said they believed 90 to 95% of NFL front offices agreed with their harsh takes on Kaepernick. One even said Kaepernick was the most hated player since Ray Kareth, who is still in prison for plotting to murder his pregnant girlfriend. It is not simply that U.S. taxpayers pick up nearly $7 billion in NFL bills. Fact of the matter is that tens of millions of dollars have been specifically paid for patriotic activities. And it is on this point that I want to, early on, drive home the point that when the Department of Defense money began to dry up, NFL players began to grow a social conscience. Or at least it wanted the American public to think so. You see, Goodell and the rest of those African Americans whom were indirectly compensated for the brand of America weren't out there taking a knee when the money's flowed in. That's right. In 2015, Senators John McCain and Jeff Flake commissioned a report, which I have right here. That's right, show prep always going here at Foreclosurepedia. They commissioned a report which SB Nation wrote about, discussing the tens of millions of dollars that the NFL, in conjunction with other professional sports teams, were paid to push patriotism. In all, 18 NFL teams received contracts, with the most, which was $879,000, going to the Atlanta Falcons over 4 years for services that included a National Guard soldier returning from a deployment, getting a surprise meet and greet with a player. Additionally, 80 National Guardsmen holding a large U.S. flag at a military appreciation game, video board messages, and a military appreciation day at a training camp. Now, I have to ask myself, where in the fuck were these hypocrites when the money was flowing in? They sure the fuck weren't taking a knee then. What is not being discussed is the simple and salient point that every one of the NFL players whom are disrespecting the American flag, and those whom fought, and many whom gave their lives defending the American flag, were only able to do such thanks to, and here comes the real fucking irony, because of that American flag. Yeah, I haven't been keeping up on those great football teams over in Iraq taking a knee to support their causes lately. You see, going back several decades to the very public schools in which Kaepernick and the rest of those pious NFL players attended, the reality is that if it were not for the blood shed by military veterans, those schools they attended would not have even existed. The monies which Uncle Sam has forked over for the buildings, hell, the grass seed for their practice fields, well, you get the point. I sure in the fuck didn't hear any of them taking a knee while in the SEC. Steve Weish of NFL.com quoted Colin Kaepernick in the kickoff of the NFL as anti-American symbolism. This is quoting Kaepernick, quote, "I am not going to stand up to show pride in a flag for a country that oppresses black people and people of color," Kaepernick told NFL media in an exclusive interview after the game. "To me, this is bigger than football, and it would be selfish on my part to look the other way. There are bodies in the streets and people getting paid leave and getting away with murder." Really, Colin? And remind me about those sleepless nights you spent on the streets of Chicago, trying to avert gun violence. Huh? Because I certainly didn't see that in the drive-by media, Colin. Help me to find those millions of dollars You and your colleagues contributed to Black Lives Matter protests or other organizations before Uncle Sam pulled the plug on its patriotism funding. I certainly do not even remember a single NFL player on a soapbox speaking in Florida, Missouri, or Maryland during all of the bullshit they allege to be against. Herd mentality, folks, nothing more glamorous. And let me tell you something. That herd mentality is that which is going to bring a financial bitch slap to the likes of which has not been seen in recent history. So let's get out there in the weeds a little bit, shall we? Here's what the NFL Game Operations Manual has to say about the national anthem. Quote, "The national anthem must be played prior to every NFL game, and all players must be on the sideline for the national anthem." Sounds pretty clear-cut to me. Continuing, during the national anthem, players on the field and bench areas should stand at attention, face the flag, hold helmets in their left hand, and refrain from talking. The home team should ensure that the American flag is in good condition. Should be pointed out to players and coaches that we continue to be judged by the public in this area of respect for the flag and our country. Failure to be on the field by the start of the national anthem may result in discipline such as fines, suspensions, and or the forfeiture of draft choices for violations of the above, including first offenses. Here's the reality. Shitting on Uncle Sam on the stage of the NFL, in front of Americans whom both love Uncle Sam and appreciate the very freedom Uncle Sam provides, like the $6.7 billion in Uncle Sam's NFL welfare program, will be a final nail in the coffin of diversity of discussions. And I'm not bullshitting around here. When you go ahead and you look at the pendulum of any serious societal matter, it swings both ways. The Trump victory is the most poignant example of that. When you begin to attack society as a whole, and you hold society and the minority of that society accountable, that's well and good. But when you attempt to make the argument that every goddamn thing in the world that is wrong is attributed to the white American male, you're gearing up for a polarization and a war that is not winnable. It is not winnable by either side. NFL games, professional sports, are not the appropriate stage to take a shit on the American flag. So let me lay out the argument in a manner in which only a trained media professional such as myself is capable of doing. First, not everything that is wrong in the world is the fault of successful white men and women. It is a contradiction of epic proportions to say that the NFL is even experiencing racism unless it is against white men. The NFL is around 72% African American. To put it bluntly, let's take a look at how the Institute for Diversity and Ethics in Sports, part of the DeVos Sport Business Management graduate program in the University of Central Florida's College of Business Administration, broke down racism in the NFL. Quote, during the NFL's 2016 season, the percent of African American players increased from 69.2% in the 2015 season to 69.7% in 2016. The percent of white players decreased from 27.9% in 2015 to 27.4% in 2016. I am fucking really at a loss to see racial disparity in the NFL other than the fact that white American males are getting the shaft. But hey, I'm not supposed to bring that up, am I? I mean, if the role was reversed, you would have those pillars of political rhetoric like Al Sharpton and Jesse Jackson screaming for investigations. No, you know what this is? This is a game of tit for tat gone terribly wrong. And you know what? You know what's next up on the radar, don't you? Climate change. Guarantee it. Al Gore's going to roll out his shopping cart of the new religious cult called climatology, and somehow the white man is responsible for that. And if the nearly 3/4 African-American NFL players believe that shitting on the memory of those who fought and died for the American flag is going to pay off in the long run, they need to take a close look at the drop in viewership the NFL is experiencing. And over time, that drop in viewership is additionally going to translate into drops in all sectors of revenue, including that which the NFL receives in the form of, that's right, you guessed it, Uncle Sam's NFL welfare plan. So what is the real story behind the Take a Knee campaign within the NFL? I mean, we haven't seen Commissioner Goodell and the rest of his overpaid NFL players on the streets battling the evil forces of America. And when it comes to the sanctimonious statements of Kaepernick, let's look at some facts. The enormity of pay which Kaepernick received was coming to an end. Kaepernick's inability to get the fuck off the bench and actually play football was not exactly what the San Francisco 49ers had in mind when they hired him. Kaepernick needed a way to ensure that his way of life could continue doing and financing what he did best. What did he do best? Not a goddamn thing. The Black Lives Matter movement brought the perfect fix, and let's not bullshit around. Kaepernick certainly wasn't taking a knee while playing in the SEC. Kaepernick sure in the fuck wasn't donating his sign-on bonuses to causes which even remotely dealt with racial disparity. And Kaepernick, for damn sure, wasn't on talking on all the circuits with the drive-by media until his career seemed to be taking a swan dive. We need to understand that as Kaepernick began taking his position, taking his knee, the McCain-Flake report was already underway, removing millions in specific patriotic advertising sponsorship. More to the point, this is how we identified that Kaepernick and the rest of his NFL brethren were being taken advantage of, according to them. Here comes the big R word, the big R that we're hearing every day. Russia. To say that foreign powers are not deeply involved in covert psychological warfare when it comes to spinning the narrative of political discord, go no further than the Facebook scandal during the 2016 election. In fact, that left-wing, riotous, alleged media outlet called CNN, the Clinton News Network, ran a piece a couple of days ago, and it had this to say about Russian manipulation and the Black Lives Matter movement. Quote, the Black Lives Matter ad appeared on Facebook at some point in late 2015 or early 2016, the sources said. The sources said it appears the ad was meant to appear both as supporting Black Lives Matter, but also could be seen as portraying the group as threatening to some residents of Baltimore and Ferguson. When we talk about using the NFL as a stage for public statements, is it appropriate to go ahead and get that white horse and go ahead and put one of those players on it rolling around with the Confederate flag? Is that appropriate? I mean, what is free speech exactly? Well, it depends. If you go to UC Berkeley, free speech comes at a very high price tag. Because when liberals gather en masse to preach their ideology of hatred and discontent against white America, that's free speech. But by God, allow a conservative group to come in there, and as we saw with the last price tag, before the plug was pulled and they could have no free speech, they were approaching $500,000. Free speech is not free, and more on point, free speech is only available to certain ideologies and beliefs. Whether or not NFL players are legit in pushing their anti-American agenda and rhetoric, I do not know. What I do know for certainty is that they are all pawns, ladies and gentlemen, in a cleverly conceived operation to foment civil unrest at its most basic level. Professional sports always has been that small respite that Americans could enjoy without having to delve into the polarized world which almost the entirety of our lives have become. And if you're a foreign intelligence agency whose main purpose is to destabilize your enemy, what better place to begin than by undermining that which gives your enemy a modicum of enjoyment and unity? The NFL and its 32 teams raked in $1.25 billion from advertisers last year, according to ESP Properties. One of those sponsors, a fellow Tennessean with Foreclosurepedia, Alan Jones, has had his fill. 2 years ago, Cleveland, Tennessee businessman Alan Jones was proudly showing off his newly acquired Hardwick clothing brand suits by providing the wardrobe for NBC's on-air talent during the network broadcasts of NFL football games. But after NFL players and coaches challenged President Donald Trump, and many took a knee during the national anthem played before their games over the weekend, Jones said he is through sponsoring the wardrobes or even advertising on stations that air the National Football League. Jones, CEO of payday lending chain Check Into Cash and owner of Hardwick Clothes, America's oldest suit maker, tweeted his criticism and change of heart last Tuesday. But you know what? Jones wasn't the only one whom takes offense to the NFL players forcing their spurious political views upon those whom went to war for the flag, so hated by Kaepernick and his colleagues. Phil Vaughn, a Ford dealership owner in Denver, whom knows the price paid to protect the flag, pulled the plug on the Black Lives Matter circus when Von Miller, a Denver Bronco and endorser for Philip Long's Ford dealerships, took a knee. Before Sunday's game against the Buffalo Bills, Von Miller and a group of Broncos players took a knee as the anthem played. That was a step too far, though, for Miller's sponsor, Phil Long Ford in Denver. According to CBS Denver, Phil Long immediately pulled his ads featuring Von Miller. Though the Ford dealer insists that he is just changing ads, the time is suspicious, coming just after Miller took a knee on Sunday. This was Phil Long Ford dealership's statement in part, quote, "We, like millions of Americans, are concerned and will respond consistently with our values as a proud American company founded by a war hero, Phil Long. While we cannot control the actions of others, we can be responsible for how we support our nation and community. And while many of the left-leaning politicals may scoff at what blue-collared Americans think, the reality is that they put President Trump in office. And when we look at how, if you will, the whirlwind destruction of the Clinton apparatchiks came down, so too the hammer may rapidly come down upon the pocketbook of the NFL. Going beyond the Twitter wars, the reality is that the NFL could have a lot more to fear from the Trump administration than simply Twitter in and of itself. First, if you start to cut the Uncle Sam NFL welfare program, you would virtually end any NFL hopes for the future. Second, if you piss off the Trump nation, the reality is that Trump has enough well-placed financiers, go no further than Goldman Sachs, and political appointees to make the normally smooth-sailing regulatory arena look like an administrative Mad Max road race. At the end of the day, the NFL team owners are afraid of their own players. That says a lot about how far the pendulum has swung when we talk about racial diversity. The Kool-Aid has been drank by too many. And whereas historically in the past the pendulum swings minutely back and forth, I fear that the pendulum may completely fall off the clock. I want to thank you for listening to my rant about the NFL. Rarely, like I say, do they delve into these waters, but this is a serious issue. Dialogue and debate are good things, but they are only good things when both opinions might be heard. And in the instant case, and the NFL is merely a microcosm playing out at a macro level, the reality is that those drums of war that we're hearing pertaining to the Korean Peninsula, those drums of war are beating here in the United States. The common man and woman, the average African American family and Caucasian family, whom are busting their ass to simply pay the bills, are not the voices that are really being heard on these spotlight stages. I hope you will stand with Foreclosurepedia and always stand for the American flag and the national anthem. We want to give a big shout out out to Chad Benoit. He runs CT Transformations up out of Maine. He has been a sponsor this hour of the Foreclosurepedia Podcast. He's got a lot of great opportunities that we're going to get into in the third hour. We're also doing a specific sit-down interview with he about his new moves. You know, he covers the vast majority of the New England states up in there. Chad and his team, they are really doing some incredible work that I really want to talk to you about. Anyway, a big shout out to Chad. We're going to get more into that here in just a moment after a word from our sponsors.